I'm going to do a Photoshop tutorial of how to make World of Warcraft thumbnails. Okay, so I'm going to use an add-on called Narcissus, and it's basically a screenshot add-on. And if you go over here, you can increase the quality. I usually go 4x because it looks good. And then I press this button right here. In order to get rid of this, I usually just go group photo, and it will get rid of the vignetting, which I will do in Photoshop. I don't want that in the screenshot. After that, I will go and hide player, and then I will zoom all the way in. So if you zoom all the way in, you'll be able to change the field of view, which is important sometimes for certain compositions that you want to try to go for. I do like a lot of information in my screenshots, so I usually go 90 FOV. This macro is for if you want to only have a mount in the scene. So press hide UI, and then you can go into your UI and still be in like your scene that you're creating and stuff. I'll put that in the description for you guys. All right, so you just put it on your bar, so you can press it, and then you go into your mounts, and you can go to any mount, hover over it, and press the keybind, and you can see that it's in the scene now instead of your character. You can add your character back with the group or not, whatever you want to do, and you can just using whatever you want to in the scene, and you scroll over here to make it smaller or bigger. Okay, so it's super good add-on for different kinds of screenshots and everything. But yeah, that's if you want a mount in your scene. Once I find somewhere that kind of looks cool, switch flight to steady flight so I can have the most control. Go to my add-on and just set up the scene like I did before. Group photo, and make sure I'm all the way zoomed in. And now we have a scene starting to come together. You can see the composition. So I have OBS on my other monitor over here, and it has a smaller size. So it's really good for composition because you're able to see what it looks like a little bit further away. And it's so important to see a different perspective sometimes, a lot of the time, especially for me. We can do all kinds of stuff in this add-on and have it look really good. So a good tip, rule of thumb, is the less amount of information, the better it's going to look. So I like using really distant stuff. So this is the composition I went for with this one. I already did the edit, so I'm going to go through like the process of doing it over again. So here I like to turn the darkness down and just kind of look at my other screen to kind of see the best tones that are going on. So I want my tones are important, so the subject is a little bit brighter than the background. Okay, so you can do all kinds of lighting with this add-on. I usually go for this lighting here, the top down. It's like really dramatic. I like that a lot. Sometimes it just looks better when it's around the back and on the top. I'm just gonna take off my camera for now so you guys can see better. So for the next part, we're gonna do the animation. So the animation's really good in this add-on. You can do all kinds of different kinds of stuff, and you just pause the add-on and just put it where you want. Unfortunately, you can't pause the enchantments. I wish you could, but you can't. So I usually have to take like multiple shots just to get the enchantment looking good. Sometimes it does not look good. You can unsheath your weapon right here and get all kinds of different compositions going. So for this one, I had it just normal on the back. If you go into the animation, type monk, and you can go through all kinds of different attacks. Also, if you press Alt and go up and down, you can change the perspective of your subject. So this is the screenshot without any editing done at all. So I'm going to give you guys like a few more tips. So in group photo, you can do a virtual. So sometimes I do this. I can put that behind my subject and go to the visual tab over here, and you can put all kinds of spells into your scene. So right click and it'll go into here and it will repeat the spell. Okay. So for some reason that's going in front of the subject when it's behind it, but I don't know why it's doing that. But yeah, just put that behind the subject and you can time the screenshot and get different kinds of visual effects in your scene. And you can just take all kinds of screenshots, get really creative with it. There's a bunch of different effects and spells that look really cool. You can increase the size by scrolling. You can get some separation from the background like that if you want to. Just depends on what you want to go for. And you can always just X out of that. And yeah. Also, you can go to like a target or something. Like say you want to target this guy. There you go. So I'm targeting this guy and just press target and he will go into your scene. So you can have all kinds of different stuff, or if you want, you can go to like self and then completely change your outfit. If you want to have two different versions of yourself. You can go over here, you can change your character even if you want to put multiple characters into one screenshot. So you can't change your race, which is unfortunate, but yeah, you get the point though. If you don't want something, you can just hide it by right clicking and change around stuff and make things bigger or smaller, put multiple characters in the scene and change the lighting any way you want to, and also the color as well. So after you get your screenshot, we can go into Photoshop. I will go new, and here you can name it if you want to. Okay, so for YouTube, I go 1920 by 1080 at 300 resolution. And with these settings, for the people that don't know a lot about Photoshop, basically, if you go to Windows, this is what I'm using, Layers, Navigator, and these as well. I also have color is important. If you go to window, you can find color, you can check color. Also, I use brush over here as well. Also, what I do a lot is I right click the outside of the canvas and I change it to black and white all the time to see tones. It looks completely different. Another thing is I have separate keybinds for myself because I like having everything really close to my hand, and I have a bunch of keybinds right here. If you guys want my keybinds, let me know in the comments and I will give you a link to that. Once we have the screenshot ready to go, you just drag and drop into Photoshop. One more important thing that I want to show you guys real quick, super important for tones, is a keybind I use to go to black and white, and it's like perfect for tonal contrast. It shows you realistically what the tones are. What you do is you go to view, proof setup, go to custom. You just go S gray down here, and then these settings right here. Okay. And then for me, I go edit keyboard shortcuts. So you go to application menus, you type proof and go down to proof colors, and I press Control Y in order to see like black and white quickly. The first thing I do, which is kind of weird, but I sharpen the image before I do anything else. So I press Control Alt Shift E to compile everything into a new layer. Or you can right click, go to convert to smart object, super important. If you put any effect on here, you can actually edit it. It's non-destructive, and also it doesn't change the pixels when you transform it. So it's important to have smart objects when you're doing heavy edits on that layer. I go filter, sharpen, unsharp mask, and in here for a small image, I want to do 1 radius and 1 threshold, And you want to look at the subject's eyes, most important thing. It's a huge difference you can actually see. It's like putting on glasses. Okay, so you want to make sure you save the image as much as you can. I use TIFF format. Now I press Ctrl-Alt-Shift+E again, and I convert that to a smart object. My keybind is Ctrl-W. You can do whatever you want and save the file. Okay, now I can do a camera raw filter to do a global color grade. Okay, so this is like my final color grade for in camera raw. And I'll go through here, show you what I did real quick. So I always add some exposure to the image because it's usually like really dark. I add some contrast. I go down on the highlights, and depending on the image, I'll play with the shadows. And I usually go down into blacks a little bit. I always like vignetting. I think it makes it look really, really good. For this image, I went up on the curve. So on the white part, you go up right here, it gives a matte to the image. So another thing that I like to do is play with the blue primary. It gives it a teal look. You can't see much here, but it definitely does do a lot most of the time. And then I give it some vibrance as well. Okay, so for the next part, you want to add your text to the image. So you can use any kind of text you want to. I like this specific font because I haven't found one that I like more than this. So I just use this for every single thumbnail, pretty much. Just press T and you just click and you can type whatever you want. And yeah, so once you have the text down, you can press Ctrl-T to transform it however you want to and make it go sideways a little bit and just kind of make sure it looks good. You can shift click and select all layers you want to, and then Ctrl-G to group those together. And with that group, you can go to your adjustment layers. You can go to exposure adjustment layer and press Alt in between the two layers to clip it to the entire group. So if I lower the exposure, it clips to every single one of these things. So I'll go back to one of the texts and go to a layer style, outer glow. It will be in a normal blending mode and with a black color, and it will give this glow to the outside, like a good outline. Okay, so also I'll do a gradient overlay, and you can click the gradient, go into this new editor right here, and you can change the gradient. So these are all ones that I've saved. You can click one of these things here. You can add more, change the color here. This is just an example, and you can see it change right here. And you can move them around to give it different effect. So I usually just do 2 and just change that to a color that's in the scene to make it consistent with the scene that you have. And that's pretty good for what we're going for. You can go to a name, you can type a new and add a new one. So now we got this going. We have the colors nice and neat, and I can change the exposure. So I add another exposure adjustment layer that's not clipped. So this is like global. This is not global. It's just the text. Okay, so I'm going to go down here, -76, and then here I will go +76. And I'll just make sure it looks good on white and black. And just reduce the opacity if I don't like it. Make sure that the text isn't too dark. It's starting to look good. Okay, so for like another global color grade, we can do color lookup and put that into one of these. Reduce the opacity to like 20% is pretty good most of the time. Okay, so for this one specifically, I added a curves adjustment layer and went down here like this, gave it a curve. This is a mask. It's white, so it's revealing everything. And if you paint with black, it takes away from this effect in certain areas. So I'll add a new layer, just a blank layer, and take this color here, and I want to give the image some bloom. So my favorite thing to do, go to screen blending mode and just duplicate this a bunch of times and go through here and just kind of give it a bloom. Get a better color here and reduce the opacity. Just kind of go through here and do a bloom where the bright spots are, and then just kind of try to make it consistent. Reduce the opacity if you want to, and just keep building on the bloom. So here it is before and after. I really like doing blooms, makes it look good. Okay, so once again, for this image specifically, I'm going to do an exposure adjustment layer, increase the exposure, press Ctrl I to invert the mask. So a black mask will make everything not appear. So I can paint with a white brush to reveal this effect in the face. Reduce the opacity and just have that face pop out a little bit more. Okay, so for another thing that I did with this image, sometimes the hands in these screenshots are just like way off with all the color grading I just did. So I'll like take a hue and saturation adjustment layer and just kind of reduce that, and then Ctrl I to invert the mask, and then paint with white where I want it revealed, the hue and saturation adjustment layer, just on the finger. So it's like way less bad looking, it's a lot better, it's less distracting. Control Alt Shift E to compile to a new layer. I personally didn't like all the yellow. I'm not a big on yellow. So what I did personally, I added a hue and saturation adjustment layer, and I went to the yellows and reduced that by 10. It'll make the yellows a little bit more orange, and I increased the saturation a little bit. And for the last part for this image, I did a curves adjustment layer. I added a bit of a curve, reduced the opacity quite a bit, just kind of looking at the armor here, and I press Ctrl I, invert that mask, and with a white brush I will paint. So these are the areas that I painted just to make it a little bit more contrast. Now the thumbnail is done. So from here you can go File, Export, Save for Web, and 1920 by 1080. Save that with a JPEG. Okay, make sure that's JPEG, and I do a quality of 80. You don't need anything above 80. And yeah, these are the rest of my settings here. You just press save. Now you have your thumbnail.